Well, the energy crisis has seen the country go days on end without consistent electricity supply. In his address to the nation this week, President Cyril Ramaphosa said one of the challenges facing Eskom has been a shortage of skilled personnel and engineers. The utility is now recruiting skilled people, including former Eskom senior plant managers and engineers from the private sector. But let's unpack what else the President had to say. We're joined by energy analyst Chris Yelland. Chris, it's great to have you with us on the program. And you've been very supportive of the President's address and the kinds of measures that he announced on Monday. A lot of people in the immediate sort of response saying, we could have done this months, even years ago. Why are we only doing these kinds of things now? Why, in your opinion, is it important for us to now look forward?
Look, firstly, may I say that, yes, I agree we should have done this a long time ago. But that doesn't solve anything, saying that. We've got to move forward now. And I think we need to be forward-looking and not backward-looking and always talking. It's now time for action. And I do believe that the President's plan is comprehensive, far-reaching, credible. It touches on many aspects. I don't necessarily think that all of them will be successful, all the different irons in the fire. One has to allow for a certain amount of projects that may not be pulled off. Some may deliver better than others. So one has to put in more irons in the fire, as it were, than you may need to, if you were assuming that every initiative would be 100% successful. Of course, people may have differences of opinion about one initiative or another, but I think overall it's very comprehensive and allows even for the possibility that some projects may not come to fruition or be less successful than others. Overall, this still is a credible plan because it is effectively an over plan, which is very important, I believe, and I'm very positive about it.
Look, the President's stopping short of what a number of experts had said in the past months, that we need to declare an energy emergency in South Africa, much like a state of emergency. That goes some way in terms of just cutting the red tape. Does this go far enough, in the same direction as an energy emergency, these plans that the President tabled?
Yes, I believe it does go far enough. Look, it is a point some people, including myself, suggested that maybe we need to declare a state of emergency. But I accept the argument of the President that it has certain legal implications that would make it undesirable. And I accept that. So I think it goes far enough. I think government has got the necessary powers to do what it should do. We need to now get down to action, and I think there are some specific next steps that are necessary, including from the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, who needs to respond quickly and put in place the necessary changes to reflect the President's message and his plan. I mean, I give, for example, the lifting of the 100 megawatt threshold above which a license is required. This has now been lifted completely. But this requires a change to Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act, and it requires action by the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. And there are other initiatives that also require intervention. So, for example, the President mentioned a more pragmatic approach to localization, which is at the moment some of the less than pragmatic regulations regarding localization are actually delaying financial close of some of the projects that will help alleviate load shedding. So that's another initiative that needs to proceed fast. Removal of restrictions, or put it this way, not restrictions, but streamlining the environmental authorizations from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment is also important. And I know that the DFFE are hard at work on that. So there's a number of next steps that have got to happen. They've got to happen quickly. And I hope that there's not going to be obstructive behavior by bureaucrats with red tape.
I mean, you've said a number of times now in that answer to me that things need to happen quickly. And another analyst in the sector, energy analyst, Professor Anton Eberhardt, also echoing those kinds of sentiment, because it comes down to the policy on paper, and we've been here before, it looks great. It comes down to implementation. Eberhard says it's going to take, if it can take 6 months for us to implement the vast majority of what the President has put on the table here, we might see that load shedding would be diminished and power cuts would end completely in the next 3 years. But it comes down to, can we do implementation in the next 6 months?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's time for action. I believe it can be done if we have the necessary will, and if this becomes what I call a national priority project. Doesn't necessarily have to be a state of emergency or state of disaster, because those hold certain specific legal implications. But it is, I believe, a national priority project to end load shedding fast. I believe it can be done within 2 years from green light, and we have got the green light now. It is ambitious. It will require a national effort, but it certainly can be done.
So, one of the other things that has been a talking point is Eskom's debt position, right? So 400 billion rand is the extent of the debt, the mountain of debt that Eskom has on its books. How do we balance that with the kind of spending as well that surely will need to come from Eskom's side, just in terms of recruiting former Eskom employees, engineers? That's going to take money to try and attract those people to come back to do country duty. I'm not sure country duty will be enough to get them back in the country. And then buying additional energy from various other sectors as well. How do we balance those two things?
You're absolutely right. The financial constraints, the debt, and the country's financial position are indeed constraints. It's not so much the cost of people coming back. Yes, of course, there are costs there, but the real costs, the big costs are, for example, what is necessary in the grid, to upgrade the grid, to enable grid access to a lot of new generation capacity. That is a very significant cost. The cost of maintenance is also very significant. And I suppose you can put, additional people resources into that category as well. So yes, these things do come at a cost, and at a time when Eskom is severely financially constrained. We have to also now look at the cost of load shedding. So it's all very well to say that something is very expensive, but the cost of not doing what we need to do is much more expensive.
I couldn't agree with you more. Energy analyst Chris Yelland, as always, thanks very much for weighing in. It's an issue close to all of our hearts, the energy crisis that we're facing. What analysts like Chris Yelland are saying, 6 months is what the President and his proposal needs for it to make the kinds of changes we need on the grid. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.